Are you an adult music student feeling the pressure of an up-and-coming music exam? Don't worry, you're not alone. In today's video, I've got you back. In this video, I'm going to share 12 invaluable tips and strategies to help you not just pass your music exam, but excel in your graded music examinations. By the way, I'm Fiona from Learn Music Together, and I help adults grow and develop their musical skills so that they can play music with confidence. Hit that subscribe button, and if you're taking a music exam, stay tuned as these tips will help you achieve that exam result that you deserve. Just before I dive in, let me know in the comments below if you've got an exam coming up, and please do share any tips and experiences that you've had in the past. Tip number 1, make sure you've read all of the syllabus. There is a wealth of information in the syllabus, although many people, including teachers, only look at the repertoire list. You'll find a wealth of information at the start of the syllabus, including things about repeated sections and whether you should play them or not. Usually, you're not required to play repeats in an exam, but the dal capo or dal segno signs should be observed. You'll also find at the front of the syllabus the parameters for the supporting tests. These are things like the oral, the sight reading, or the musical knowledge. Knowing what rhythms and time signatures and performance markings you'll get, for example, in the sight reading test, will enable you to focus on those elements in your practice. Here's an example of the sight reading parameters that Trinity College London require for piano exams. You can see that the keys and time signatures are given for each grade, plus the rhythms and performance detail that you may be tested on. The parameters are cumulative, so for grade 2, the sight reading test will be in one of the following keys: C major, G major, or A minor. It will be written in either 2/4, 3/4, or 4/4, and the melody may include crotchets, minims, semibreves, dotted minims, and tied notes. And if you're in America, that's quarter notes, half notes, whole notes, dotted half notes, and tied notes. Information is also given about the rests that you could be tested on. So for grade 2, you'll have minim and semibreve rests, or half note and whole note rests, but you won't get crotchet or quarter note rests, as they are a grade 3 requirement. You'll also need to recognise the performance directions piano, forte, mezzo forte, allegretto, and moderato. Now, with all of that information, you can prepare effectively and ensure that you are confident sight reading music that has all of those parameters and elements that I've just mentioned. There are some fantastic books available to help you improve your sight reading skills. A personal favourite of mine is by Paul Harris. It's called Improve Your Sight Reading, and it's available for a wide array of instruments. I'll put a link below if you're interested in learning more about that book. And I also love the app Sight Reading Factory, because they have custom built sight reading tests that you can play along to and practice, but you can also build your own. So if you want to practice a specific rhythm in a specific key, Sight Reading Factory enables you to do that. So I'll put a link to their site in the comments below. Make sure you also read the details for the technical requirements of the exam. These include things like the scales, maybe you've got some exercises to do, and make a note of the metronome speeds. Now, some exam boards require you to do technical exercises in addition to the scales, whilst other exam boards give you a choice of either scales or technical work, or even orchestral extracts. Avoid making any assumptions that the requirements will be the same as your last grade, and make sure to read all the details in full in the syllabus for every single exam that you take, as things do change from one year to the next. Now, you'll notice that metronome speeds are often marked in the syllabus, and they're given as the minimum required speed, so you'll want to ensure that you can accomplish these well before the exam. Some exam boards will also stipulate what dynamics the scales should be played, and these are often ignored by candidates, so make sure you're not one of them. You may also be tested and required to play the scales with different articulation patterns. So again, read the details in the syllabus and make sure you practice your scales with all the variations that the examiner might request from you. You can see here in this page taken from Trinity College of London's Grade 5 Clarinet syllabus, that the minimum tempo speed for each scale is 116 beats per minute on your metronome. Now that means that you'll need to play 2 notes per click at that tempo, because scales are always written out in quavers or eighth notes. You'll also need to prepare the scales both toned and slurred and at a mezzo forte dynamic. Now tip number 2, avoid going from one grade to the next without learning a variety of music in between. So often I hear of students only learning the required number of exam pieces and spending months trying to get them up to a reasonable standard. Now whilst exams can be a great source of motivation, this shouldn't be the sole purpose for you learning to play. Just because you can play 3 exam pieces at a particular grade, it doesn't mean that you're an accomplished player, nor will it provide musical enjoyment in the long term. So make sure to learn a wide selection of repertoire in between your exams, and when you're preparing for an exam, learn lots of pieces from the exam list and then select the ones that play to your strengths. Now these might not necessarily be your favourites, but if you're wanting to attain a high exam mark, choose pieces that play to your strengths rather than your weaknesses. My third tip is to give equal attention to all aspects of the exam. People often give loads of their time to learning the pieces, and when you compare that with how much time they invested in the supporting tests and scales, it's often unbalanced. Make sure to portion your time accordingly. You can use the breakdown of the marks as a guide. So in a Trinity College London exam, the pieces add up to 66% of the final marks. The scales, 14%, and the 2 supporting tests are worth 10% each. So if you spent a total of 30 hours practicing your 3 pieces, then you should have spent at least 6 hours practicing the supporting tests and approximately 4.5 hours focusing on the scales. Now these are guidelines. It may take you longer. Obviously you need to invest the amount of time that you need to attain the level required of that grade. But you can use this breakdown as a guide to get started. Tip number 4, ensure that you observe all the metronome marks in your pieces. Most exam pieces have a tempo marking and a metronome mark. Now whilst these are a guideline, they will help you achieve the right approach to the style and character of the piece. If a piece is played too slowly or too fast, the communication will be compromised. Having said that, if you're struggling to reach the maximum tempo and you've got an exam coming up, it is better to go at a slightly slower pace so that you get a higher degree of accuracy. But if you prepare well enough in advance and you do plenty of repertoire practice between exams, you should be able to meet those metronome marks. And if you're struggling from one grade to the next, perhaps consider slowing down the pace, because things are only going to get more challenging as you continue to go from one grade to the next. My 5th tip is to download and study the marking scheme. Understanding how the marks are allocated will help you prepare more reliably. Whilst we'd all love to reach perfection before the exam, that isn't always feasible. Knowing what to focus on in order to get the most marks can be really helpful in the lead up to the exam date. In Trinity examinations, the mark scheme looks like this. You'll see that each piece is marked in 3 categories. There are 7 marks available for fluency and accuracy, 7 marks available for technical facility, and 8 marks for communication and interpretation. So playing all the right notes in the correct place is fantastic, but it's no good if you ignore the performance directions such as the dynamic and tempo markings, or your tone lacks focus and clarity, because your marks will be unbalanced. There's only a maximum of 7 for playing all the notes in the right place. The other marks out of the 22 that are available are for things like your tonal control, your dynamics, your articulation patterns, the character of the piece, your communication. So those things are equally as important as playing all the correct notes. Tip number 6, do some practice examinations. Often when practicing, we stop when we make mistakes and we don't run things back to back. Now don't underestimate how much more concentration, focus and energy it takes to do all the work required for an exam consecutively. It takes practice to learn not to stop when you make a mistake, and playing under pressure is also something that requires preparation. Start doing mock examinations 2 to 4 weeks beforehand, and ideally see if you can create some pressure by inviting friends or family members to listen. Whilst nothing beats the pressure created by people watching and listening to you in person, if that's not possible, recording yourself on video is a good substitute, because I don't know anybody who doesn't tense up when they hit that red record button. Tip number 7, consider the order that you'd like to do the exam in. You may be unaware that as a candidate you can choose to do the exam in any order. It's usual for instrumentalists and singers who have an accompanist with them to start their exams with the prepared songs or pieces. And in many ways that makes sense, as it means you don't have to go in the exam room alone, which can be of great comfort. You may wish to do the oral tests next after you've completed your songs, before doing the scales and sight readings so that you can take a short break from the playing. This is totally acceptable, and all you'll need to do is inform the examiner of your preference. Pianists, guitarists and percussionists and harpists usually start with their technical work, but if you would prefer to start with your pieces, that's fine, just let the examiner know. Now, if you took notice of tip number 6, you'll remember that I said to do some practice exams. When you do these, it's a good idea to do things in a different order each time and see if you have a preference. This can be particularly helpful for wind and brass players, as taking a break to do the oral test allows you to regain your breath fully before continuing with the playing, and that can really help with stamina. Tip number 8 is for instrumentalists. Now make sure you practice with the accompaniment. So often I hear of candidates turning up to an exam having never heard the pieces with the piano accompaniment. They just have a quick run through before the exam and hope that everything fits together. The problem though is that many people will find the piano accompaniment distracting at first and be put off as the piece now sounds completely different. In today's world, listening to music and finding the accompaniments is so much more accessible, so make sure to listen to your exam pieces with the accompaniments regularly and practice along to them. You'll often find the piano accompaniments on YouTube for free, so you've got no excuse not to practice along before you have the opportunity to practice with someone in person. Here are a couple of YouTube channels that I can recommend for woodwind players. For clarinet and saxophone piano accompaniments, check out Saxophone Resources. And if you play the flute, CG Flute Academy has many recordings from a variety of exam boards on their channel. If you know of any other good channels or websites where people can go and find the piano accompaniments to exam pieces, then please share in the comments below. I'm sure lots of people will be grateful for your suggestions. Now, tip number 9 is for pianists. Be prepared to play on a grand or an upright piano. While most people can take their own instruments to an exam, pianists obviously you can't. Ideally, you want to arrange a practice session before the exam day so that you can try out the instrument. If that's not possible, it's worth contacting the exam centre to get more information about the piano. If you've never played on a grand piano before, it can be overwhelming. So my advice is ask the examiner if you can have a quick try on the instrument before you begin your exam. Tip number 10 is for those that might need some special assistance with their exam. So let the exam board know well in advance if you require any special examination needs. All inclusivity is taken seriously by every exam board, and if you require any adjustments to your exam or simply wish to make the examiner aware of a disability or health condition, a special needs provision form will most likely need to be completed. These need to be submitted well in advance of your exam and often with the entry form. So make sure to check out the website of whichever exam board you're taking an exam with for further details. Tip number 11 is plan the exam day well in advance. This may make you laugh, but on more than one occasion I've had people turn up to their exam having forgotten their instrument. And it's not uncommon for someone to forget their music or something like a reed. It goes without saying that these types of incidents cause unnecessary stress and raise anxiety levels, even though often they can be resolved. Creating a checklist of what you need to pack is something I highly recommend. Here's a few ideas which I've put together, and yes, these are things that people have forgotten when they've entered my exam room. Spare reeds, instrumental straps, resin, valve oil, their backing track if it's required, a plectrum to play their guitar, an amplifier, a CD player, and the speaker that's required to play the CD player through. You also want to ensure that you have all of your music. Check that all the pages are there and check whether you need to provide photocopies for the examiner. If you have a page turn in one of your pieces, it's best to photocopy that page, which is allowed so long as you have the original music with you as well. Tip number 12, plan your route to the exam venue. Exam venues are often in churches or community centres, and whilst you might know the area, you may not have visited the venue specifically in the past. Getting lost and being worried about time is another unnecessary stress, so plan out your route well in advance and ideally do a test run before the exam day. You also want to make sure, on the other hand, that you don't arrive at the exam venue too early. Nothing makes people more nervous than just sitting and waiting in an exam waiting room. So now you have 12 fantastic tips to ensure that you ace your music exam. I'd recommend creating a plan or a timeline of things to do. If you need help planning your practice sessions, I have a guide that you can grab for free. I'll put the link in the description below this video. Lastly, on the day of your exam, warm up at home, as not all exam venues have ideal warm-up facilities. Now avoid extended hours of practice on the day of your exam. You want to conserve your energy and focus for the main event. If it would make you feel better, play through your exam pieces or scales slowly, but I recommend to my students choosing something completely different to warm up with. Remember that examiners want you to succeed and they are looking forward to hearing you play. Walk in the exam room with a smile, as that will help you relax, and know that as an examiner, I understand that mistakes can happen. We are human beings, not robots. Don't overreact if things go wrong. In fact, give yourself permission to make mistakes, as even professionals expect a higher rate of mistakes during a performance than they do in a rehearsal. When the exam is finished, forget about any errors that you made and focus on remembering all the things that went well. After all, if you prepare to the best of your ability, then no one could ask any more of you. Let me know in the comments below if you have an exam coming up, and please do share any tips and experiences you've had in the past. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can get notified every time I release new videos. You'll also see on the screen right now a link to a couple more videos that I think will be helpful in preparing for your music exam. Good luck if you have an exam coming up, and do let me know how you get on. Bye for now.